Your patients, they're asking about these weaponized ticks. The headlines are everywhere these days. Lyme disease as a government bioweapon. These conspiracy theories are spreading faster than the ticks themselves. Here's what the actual evidence shows, and why getting this right matters to each and every Lyme patient walking into your practice. HHS just held a major Lyme roundtable the other day. They are publicly emphasizing new diagnostic efforts are really necessary to meet the clinical need of patients throughout our country who are suffering with chronic tick-borne illnesses. And regardless of anyone's politics, this is a useful sign. The national conversation is shifting toward better measurement, earlier detection, clearer differentiation, and tools that match the complexity that we actually see in our clinics. But here's the reality. Your patients are going to be coming in with questions about these sensational headlines. They want to know if Lyme was actually weaponized or not. They want to know if the government actually created this disease. And here's the hard truth. Dismissing patient concerns kills trust, but so does validating these conspiracy theories. The middle ground is evidence, and that's exactly what we're going to be covering today. Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Moorcroft, and I've spent the better part of 2 decades treating patients with chronic complex illnesses, specifically Lyme and other tick-borne infections. And I've spent years training providers on how to do the same thing and how to address those complex chronic Lyme cases that walk into their clinic. And in fact, this week alone, I've had at least 3 separate providers ask me how to handle that weaponized tick questions that their patients are coming in with. So let's settle this once and for all. By the end of this video, you're going to have the research-backed talking points to handle these conversations professionally, maintain patient trust, and redirect to what actually helps them get better in their case. You'll understand why the genomic evidence actually shows Lyme's origins, what historical military research did and didn't do, and exactly how to respond to patients when they bring up these questions at your practice. So first, let's just completely annihilate that timeline that conspiracy theories depend upon. The weaponization theory requires that Lyme disease is something new. Something that was created in the lab in the 50s, 60s, or even the 70s, right before we discovered it, right? That's the foundation of all of these conspiracy theories and what they rest upon. The evidence actually says otherwise. Borrelia burgdorferi, the causative agent of Lyme disease, isn't something new. In fact, it's quite ancient. So let me show you exactly what the research proves. Back in 1991, hikers in the Alps discovered a frozen mummy. They named him Ötzi the Iceman, and he's been preserved in ice for over 5,300 years, since before things like the pyramids were built, even before written language existed in most of the world. When researchers at Stanford Medicine decided to sequence his DNA, they found something remarkable. They found DNA consistent with Borrelia burgdorferi infection. And that's the direct evidence of human infection at least 5,300 years ago. But then it gets even a little bit more interesting, right? Genomic reconstructions of modern Borrelia burgdorferi strains tell us that the organism has circulated around North American ecosystems for tens of thousands of years. And it's commonly estimated to be over 60,000 years old. This means that Borrelia burgdorferi has been infecting animals in North America long before modern humans even arrived on this continent. So the organism behind Lyme predates human civilization by millennia. So what's actually new? 3 things: recognition, diagnosis, and ecological conditions that are increasing human and tick contact opportunities. And we didn't discover Lyme disease in Lyme, Connecticut in 1975 because it was created, off the shores of Connecticut. We discovered it because we finally had the tools to identify what had been around for a really, really long time. And because suburban development, habitat modification, and global climate change creating more and more tick habitats, allowing their ranges to start to expand and pushing humans closer and closer to contact with tick environments. So while that disease that we all call Lyme was clinically described in the 1970s, that organism behind that infection has actually existed for over 60,000 years. And that's not theory, that's genetic evidence. And this matters for your practice because when patients come in asking if Lyme was manufactured, you can point to ancient DNA evidence that definitively shows it wasn't. So what actually happened? Because there's so many stories and conversations, discussions, questions, and theories about what's going on, in terms of, was this weaponized? Is this biologic warfare? So this is what the historical record actually shows about military research and the potential for weaponization. Because here's where things really get a little bit nuanced. So yes, the US military tested insects as potential weapons. That part isn't conspiracy theory. That's documented history. But no, that doesn't mean they created Lyme disease. So let me tell you about what the declassified documents actually prove. The Black Vault has released primary source documents on Operation Big Itch. And this is a Cold War era program that described field testing with uninfected fleas as potential vectors. Focus was testing the feasibility of delivery systems. So the question they were really asking was, can we disperse insects effectively? Not, can we create new pathogens? So these tests use uninfected insects. They were studying dispersal methods, not deploying infected agents. This is entomological warfare research, and it actually does exist. But there's a crucial distinction between testing a delivery system and creating or weaponizing specific pathogens. So here's what changed. In 1969, President Nixon formally renounced U.S. offensive biological weapons, restricting work to defensive research only.
I have decided that the United States of America will renounce the use of any form of deadly biological weapons that either kill or incapacitate.
Then, in 1975, the Biological Weapons Convention entered into force, prohibiting development, stockpiling, and even the use of biological weapons for states' parties. So here's where the timeline really matters. Military research into these insect vectors actually happened. Policy shifted in 1969. International prohibition came around in 1975, and Lyme disease was clinically described in 1975. But, and this is really the crucial part, there's no solid evidence that Borrelia burgdorferi was created as a bioweapon. The genomic evidence we just covered argues it's naturally ancient and not manufactured. And here's the thing. That doesn't prove that nobody ever experimented with Borrelia, but it certainly undercuts that really specific claim that Lyme was invented in the mid-20th century. And, this is an organism that's at least 60,000 years old. And there are some folks who are questioning whether it could be as old as 13 million years. Now, that evidence is also a little questionable because a lot of DNA starts to really degrade a lot after 1 to 2 million years. But there's even evidence it might be older than we think, right? They just haven't proven that yet. The other part is these bioweapons programs tested dispersal of uninfected insects. And these two separate facts, that don't connect the way conspiracy theories claim they do. This is so important to me because has the government ever lied to me? Yes. Do I think that they might ever do it again? Yes, it's certainly highly probable that someone will do something that they want to cover up. We've seen this time and time again. Now, is there evidence that there may have been biologic research stations that weren't containing the animals as best they could? Yes, absolutely. But does this mean that there was a concerted effort to switch Borrelia burgdorferi physiology, biochemistry, and the way it infects you? No, it doesn't. And what's really interesting to me, as a practitioner who's been treating chronic Lyme disease for nearly 2 decades, and as a former patient having had chronic Lyme disease and chronic babesiosis, one of the biggest things I've noticed is that Lyme doesn't fight reality. Lyme disease will take its time, and it will, in an environment that's good, and it's nutritious and there's not a lot of defenses against it, it will attempt to reproduce and infect you and make you sicker and sicker and feed off you. However, when the environment changes, your immune system gets activated, you're taking botanicals or pharmaceuticals to help kill that infection, it doesn't fight that reality. It just hides. It doesn't hide with fancy mechanisms. It might go into a round body or a cyst form. Essentially, it kind of insides out and rolls up into a ball, very much like an armadillo. And most of our antibiotics that are reliant on its metabolism in order to kill it can't affect that. There's a few that can and some botanicals, but not a lot of things that do. Now, on the other side, many people are aware of biofilm microcolonies, right? So a whole bunch of them get together and they start to sequester fat and all kinds of other things to help protect them. And so they've measured these biofilms, and some of them need 200 to 500 times the normal antibiotic dose to penetrate it. So this is, interesting, but really what the biofilm microcolony does is it creates this protective measure. And then inside of it, this protective covering, right? So then within this protective covering, it grows and grows and grows until it reaches a critical mass, at which point it waits. When the time is right and the environment within your body is conducive for it to reproduce, it will open up. So these things may sound fancy, but really all they are is they lay low until the time is right. This seems very unlikely to be some fancy genetically modified weaponized bug because it doesn't work fast enough. It actually works super slow. This is part of the problem with onset of symptoms, and this is part of the problem with treating it and this whole chronic Lyme disease thing. People don't like the idea of chronic Lyme because they don't think things reproduce that slowly. But when you're hundreds of thousands of years old, why the hell do you need to actually reproduce quickly? It takes its time. And that is what's so important here. The conspiracy theories, like if you wanted to weaponize a bug to go after an entire nation or a group of people, you would want it to work quickly. It doesn't make sense. We need to know more. The Government Accountability Office is going to be undertaking an investigation. And so I really think that that's something that's important for us to talk about at this point. It's really timely, and I think your patients really need to hear about this. So a provision attached to fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, is directing the Government Accountability Office, also known as the GAO, to investigate allegations and claims of this possible historical weaponization or government involvement in Lyme disease. And this is probably a really good thing because despite all the evidence I've just talked about, if new evidence emerges that we haven't been given all the truth or part of the truth, or people have been hiding things, or we have new DNA evidence that says it's older or younger, or that we have old DNA that's then been changed, this might change everything. And this is something that I know is going to be coming through your office, and many of our patients are going to know about because this is being covered by policy media and it's real. But before anyone celebrates or anyone panics, here's what it actually means. It's an investigation directive. It's not evidence, it's a decision. It's a decision to examine records and make findings based upon what those records show. So Congress is directing the GAO to review the historical record, and that's it. It's not validating the weaponization theory, and it also doesn't disprove it. What it means is we're going to look at what we have and get a report back on what they find. Rather than saying these people are right, those people are wrong, or vice versa, we're saying, hey, we don't have enough information at this point, but we do have evidence that's conflicting, so we should look further. And one of the things that I'm always happy to say is I love the truth, because if we base the truth on the best evidence today, and that best evidence changes next week, I'm all for looking into it and finding out what that means, especially in the treatment of the patients in front of us. So this investigation will review historical documents, interview relevant parties if possible, and then produce a report with those findings. So what we need to do really at this point is watch and wait a little bit, right? So we're going to watch for what the report actually concludes, not what those headlines claim. I'm not all for saying they're going to do it right for sure, but they're having a conversation that's moving in the right direction. So I'm going to critically evaluate this, just like I do every paper that comes out. I'm not going to read the abstract. I'm not going to read the sensational headline and believe that that's the only thing there is, right? We need to look at what is actually concluded and then make decisions for ourselves based on the best evidence so that we can do the best we can to treat the suffering individuals in front of us and alleviate their suffering. Because here's what I've learned in the years of treating complex chronic Lyme cases. Sensational headlines rarely match the nuanced reality of the clinical evidence, and it certainly doesn't really match with what our patients are experiencing in their own bodies. The GAO investigation is important. It's also appropriate. It's not a proof of anything except that Congress wants answers to questions that their constituents are asking. And this is one of the beautiful things and sometimes the challenging things of our country. We are a consumer-driven society, and the consumers, the Lyme patients who are suffering, those who see suffering families and friends, want to have answers. And so thankfully, we're seeing action taken in an appropriate manner. So when patients bring this up, and they will, yes, there is an investigation underway. We'll see what those findings show. And in the meantime, let's focus on what we know actually is going to work in your case. And finally, here's exactly how to respond when patients bring this up, because this is where clinical skill meets communication strategy. And your move is simple: validate, don't debate, and redirect to what is actually actionable. Here's the 3-step response that maintains trust while redirecting back to actionable treatment steps that help your patient get better today. And step 1 is to validate. Hey, I understand why these headlines are concerning. A lot of people are talking about this. And when you say something like this or similar, you're not dismissing their concern. You're acknowledging it. It's real. And they're not alone wondering about it. Step 2, present the evidence briefly. Hey, the genomic evidence states that Borrelia is ancient. We have direct human evidence dating back at least 5,300 years ago with Ötzi the Iceman, and the evolutionary evidence suggesting it's been in North American ecosystems for over 60,000 years. The scientific consensus is that it's naturally occurring and not manufactured. And this is probably why it's so complicated to treat, because it's so well adapted to slow growth and a long life in this environment. In this way, you're giving them the facts without lecturing. You're showing that you've looked at the evidence and that you actually truly care about what they're concerned about. And now step 3, redirect to the actionable. When we're talking about these sensational headlines and what may or may not come out of this investigation when it's finally over, but each and every day, so many of our chronic Lyme patients get distracted by things they read online, what other people are telling them to do, and they don't understand the full picture of what's going on. And that's where we've spent years, decades in medical training to understand how to take these things that don't always have a solid answer behind them, but they have a clear strategy, and turn them into an actionable treatment plan. So you could say something like, what matters for your case is accurate diagnosis and effective treatment. So let's focus on what we can do to help you get better as quickly as possible. And that's the critical move here. You've acknowledged their concern, you've provided the evidence-based context, and now you're bringing them back to what actually serves them, their health. Use this as an opportunity to demonstrate your evidence-based approach. You're the provider who addresses concerns with science and not with dismissal. You're the provider who stays current on what patients are hearing and thinking about. That builds trust. And trust allows you to guide them through complex treatment decisions when the real work begins. Now, if you're a provider who wants to master complex chronic Lyme cases and all the other environmentally acquired tick-borne illnesses, mold illness, going beyond basic protocols, if you want the clinical confidence to handle the diagnostic challenges, the co-infections, the cases that don't respond to standard treatment, I put together training specifically for that. So check the link in the description below for more information on how we help providers become their community's trusted Lyme expert. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing that you need to know. Here's a reminder that's easy to forget when we're focused solely on those Lyme headlines. Tick-borne illness is bigger than Lyme alone. Babesiosis, Bartonellosis, other co-infections are being recognized beyond historical hotspots as ticks expand their range. And babesiosis in particular is so easy to miss because a lot of the symptoms are nonspecific. Now we have a few that really point us in that direction of Babesia, but so many people I've seen treated for Lyme and Bartonella and mold forever and ever and ever, people have either diagnosed and forgotten about the Babesia or missed looking at it altogether, and that is the crucial key. So when your patient is presenting with fatigue and day or night sweats, air hunger, bone pain, maybe you're thinking a little bit about Babesia, but what about the GI symptoms? What about the dysautonomia? And what about the severe depression and anxiety that doesn't look exactly like Bartonella, doesn't look just like Lyme, and it's certainly not responding to standard psychotherapeutic treatments. You go take this patient, you treat them for Lyme, you treat them for Bartonella, they improve a little or not at all. It's because you've missed the Babesia, and in some cases, other co-infections like Borrelia miyamotoi, or maybe it is mold, or maybe there's heavy metal toxicity. This is the real clinical reality that matters more than any conspiracy theory. So as the national conversation shifts and HHS's Roundtable signals it is shifting, we're moving towards better measurement, earlier detection, clearer differentiation, and improved tools so those tools match the complexity of what we're all seeing clinically. That is what should really excite you as a provider, because it does for me. I'm so fine taking the evidence I have and then applying the art of medicine to that unique individual in front of me. But when we have an opportunity to see the evidence base grow that will inform our unique interactions and our unique treatment protocols for that individual, that really gets me excited, because that means we're moving in the direction of better outcomes, quicker outcomes. And with earlier diagnosis, maybe even less chronic Lyme. How's that? So really, as a provider, what should excite you is it's not those sensational headlines. Think more about those diagnostic breakthroughs. People are talking about AI-enabled blood testing that would achieve over 90% sensitivity and specificity across all disease stages, and it's expected to be commercially available by the end of 2026. Now, I find this great if it's going to happen, and with a lot of the AI that's going on, we see really rapid progression. But the other part is, they're saying, hey, we need to get to tests that are over 90% sensitivity and specificity. So this means there's a broader conversation acknowledging that the sensitivity and specificity is lower than what many would lead us to believe. So we're getting more truth out of all of this. And then they're also talking about molecular testing that uses digital droplet PCR that can identify down to 5 bacterial cells with excellent accuracy. And I think that's amazing. I know there are labs out there that are doing things like this, like Galaxy Lab, like IGeneX already, but now we're seeing it more commercially viable and more interest in it. The other caveat to this is some people are also saying that these digital droplet PCR tests are going to distinguish between a past infection and an active infection. And based on DNA technology in blood, that's not really what's happening there, but that's a conversation for another day. The fact that this conversation is on the docket, is in the media, is in the government, is at medical institutions, and there are people like you and I who are interested in diving even deeper than just the abstract of a paper, this means nothing but awesome things for our patients and their road to recovery. And that's the future of Lyme diagnosis. This is coming, and that's what changes patient outcomes. So let's really bring this home. When your patients are asking you about these weaponized ticks, and they will, because those headlines are everywhere, now you have the evidence-based talking points to handle those conversations professionally. Borrelia, it's ancient. 5,300 plus years ago, there was evidence of direct human exposure. And over 60,000 years of evolutionary evidence. It's not manufactured. Military research into insect vectors does exist, but it was focused more on dispersal methods using uninfected insects and not creating new pathogens. However, the GAO investigation will examine that historical record, and let's watch for what it actually concludes and not what all the headlines are telling us now that it's going to conclude when it's over. Let's see what new information comes out, because maybe some of the stuff I'm talking about today, or even a lot of it, might need to be revised based upon the evidence. But in the meantime, now you have the ability to have a response in practice that will validate their concerns, that will present the evidence clearly and concisely, and redirect them to what is actually actionable in their case. And that's how you maintain trust while keeping the focus on what actually matters, on keeping the focus on what actually helps your patients get better. So rather than allowing them to go down the road of paralysis by analysis, trying to study things that haven't even been started yet, so we don't even know what the research is going to show, we can actually redirect them to focus on taking sustained, consistent action each and every day in the step of their healing goals. Because here's the truth. Tick-borne illness is so freaking complex. Co-infections are real. Diagnostic challenges are real. Patient suffering is real. And doctor burnout, if you don't have a clear strategic approach to this, that's real too. And the providers who master these complexities, those who can confidently diagnose Borrelia, Babesia, Bartonella when others miss it, those who understand when they should even suspect Bartonella or Babesia, those who know how to interpret complex lab results and sequence treatments appropriately. Those are the providers who are building thriving practices, who are actually changing patient outcomes. The conspiracy theories will fade. New evidence will emerge, but the clinical need for highly skilled practitioners won't. Focus on mastery, focus on evidence, and focus on what actually works. And stay tuned till next time. We're going to be diving deeper and deeper into Lyme and all these other co-infections and how to help your patients get better while keeping an evidence-based approach and also partnering with them so that you can use that art of medicine to really make a huge impact in their lives. I'm Dr. Tom Moorcroft. I want to say thanks for joining me for this. If I missed something, if I overstated something, understated something, please let me know in the comments below. I'd also love to ask you, I appreciate you sticking around all this time. If you've found this helpful, please, hit that like and subscribe button. Turn on those bell notifications so that you can be notified the next time we put out some new content. And you can also, by commenting and continuing the focus on the videos that we're putting out and commenting on the next one and the next one, you can actually help to steer this conversation, and together we can help the patients we're seeing make true progress in regaining their health, regaining their life, and going back to living a Lyme-free life just like I am. So until next time, thanks so much. Enjoy.